Good
All right.
morning.
Morning, guys.
Morning. How's everyone?
I think we're all good. Everyone hearing all right?
Yeah.
Cindy, are you there?
We can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear us, but see you talking.
Can you guys hear me? The floating Z.
Yeah. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
hear you. Okay.
How you been, man?
Good. I'm not sure if we've ever met or chatted before, but I watched some of your guys' clips from the old episodes, so I hope ours can be like as good as those, or I don't know, have a natural combo with those.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Perfect. All right. Let's get rolling. So, episode 33, we're doing our derivatives for DGen season. We have on Drift, a DEX, basically. You guys do a lot more than just perpetuals. You guys have swaps, vaults, all kinds of things. Before we get there, could you give us your guys each of your own intros? But we like to center those around your background and kind of lead into some moments where you guys were exit liquidity throughout your journey into crypto.
I love that. Yeah, I can get started. So, my name is Cindy, one of the co-founders of Drift. Been in crypto since around 2017, 2018. Started off really just doing a bunch of trading in the space. I think that the kimchi premium ARB was like the trade that started it all. And maybe that was my exit liquidity moment towards the end of the trade where spreads kind of closed to like less than 10%. Post the 2017 era, started a small prop shop where we were mainly trading off-chain perps and still doing a bunch of like funding trading. Post doing that for about 2 years. Early 2021 was looking at the explosion of on-chain options in the space. And found it funny that there were so many builders building on-chain options when Perps was a 100x bigger market. So early 2021, we saw that Solana was also taking off, and the infrastructure on Solana seemed ripe for a derivatives product that nobody was really looking at the time. So essentially built a team together with Z as one of my co-founders to build Drift. Initially, we started off as a virtual AMM in our V1, which launched in October, November 2021. But earlier this year, we launched a V2 that has not just a virtual AMM, but also an order book, just-in-time liquidity auction, as well as more improvements on the VMM. So we recently just launched Drift Liquidity Provider, DLP for short, which allows you to stake into the AMM and get the return payoff of an AMM. So overall, we're now the largest perp DEX on Solana with the largest amount of users, comparable to EVM chains in terms of users and active users, which we're very excited about. And yeah, really just looking to scale up the capacity, scale up the user growth, and ride the current wave.
Awesome. And Z, could you also go into maybe how you guys met as well along that journey?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I met Cindy through a mutual friend before I was ever working in crypto. And yeah, I just had a conversation with them and started learning more about Solana. Honestly, I've never like tried to build anything in crypto before this. I remember looking at Solidity in like 2020 when we were all just sitting at home. And I was just thinking, oh, this seems like kind of weird. It kind of reminded me of like building iPhone apps. Like you had to learn a whole separate language, and it wasn't like, I don't know, like it wasn't like transferable. But then I heard Solana was writing in Rust, and I was like, oh, Rust, like you can use that for lots of things. And I keep hearing all this good stuff about Rust. So that just, I guess, kind of encouraged me to go down the rabbit hole there. And I guess since I've started to now, I feel a lot more confident in like building robust risk engines and smart contracts. It's kind of just a rite of passage that you have to go through as a developer. Like you need a lot of time. You need to see like, a lot of use cases, and then you start to get a feel for the extent that problems can occur and like how to prevent them, and what level of like unit testing and fuzz testing do you need before you can like be reliably confident about something. So that's kind of been, I feel like that was my evolutionary arc since getting into crypto, is just being super savvy on the risk and protection side, while not compromising all the like fun, useful, capital efficient features that people enjoy too.
Awesome. And so I want to get into a bit about V1 and kind of that history. But if you could just give us the like I'm 5 explanation of how Drift works on the back end, and why specifically something like this is you guys chose for it to be built on Solana.
Yeah, maybe I can talk through the evolution, and then Z can talk through the why Solana backend. Yeah, in terms of the evolution, initially, like we mentioned, we were built using virtual AMM, and a lot of the features that users requested, inching towards building and getting like a centralized exchange experience from the VMM. So obviously, I think there's some issues with the VMM, like long short imbalance that we strive to solve. But ultimately, we believe that it would be better solved by having a robust liquidity mechanism that included more matching engine abilities, such as order books and the jet auction as well. And ultimately, we've seen the positive effects of this in V2, where liquidity is a lot deeper. We have multiple makers. We have like multiple deposit mechanisms where you can provide liquidity. So it's a lot more robust, especially for more longer tail assets.
Yeah, and I
Awesome.
guess the why Solana, or I think we both alluded to why Solana, like when we initially started building for the project. Like we just saw it as it was I guess more comparable to the financial system that people are used to off chain. Like you have much faster block times. There's ability to parallelize things with like the write and read locks on the account level. So if you're savvy builder, like you can build something that's really scalable and whatnot, assuming that the infrastructure is actually there. And then I guess over time, honestly, when we started building, the promise of Solana wasn't really like working. Like if you try to use RPCs, you try to get transactions through, like there would be a lot of problems. Like back then, honestly, during the time that the token's price was the highest, ironically. And then right now, if you use Solana, I think a lot of the apps are much more mature, and it seems like a lot of the infrastructure at the validator level is also becoming more mature, and there's now like multiple different implementations coming out behind the scenes, like not really like on the consumer facing side, but just like back-end engineers, like really pushing the like network improvements there. So I think it definitely makes sense not to like hop lily pad like to every new chain. Like I remember like Near came out and everyone's like, oh, are we all going to Near now? And then, you just repeat that every 3 months. There's like this new thing that everybody's talking about. But it's a really big investment to like move somewhere else and like try to become, technical experts there. And, everybody has their own set of trade-offs. And ultimately it just makes sense to, like pick the thing you want to be an expert in and push forward until you think there's literally no room to push forward. At least that's my mental model. I don't know if that was the answer you guys were trying to glean, but
that's great. I'm sure you guys get the Solana question like over and over again. So I don't want to harp on it too long, but I wanted to hear maybe a bit about what you guys. Obviously, Solana has grown pretty significantly in terms of like people using it, the apps on there. You described some of the evolution of it. Some things weren't working, and now they're working a lot better. What kind of things do you guys see as the improvements that need to happen that haven't happened, or maybe some that have happened that kind of changed the game for you guys? Or just touch on a little bit about the Solana ecosystem and its development.
Yep. I think I can start off here, and Z can probably dive into the details a bit more. So for context, I mainly lead like product and BD, whereas Z leads the research and dev side. On our side, I think the main blocker that we've had to the ecosystem growing, and maybe like some things that we really want to see improve, is probably on the bridging capabilities into Solana. I think when we talk to traders and users, that's been like the number one question. It's like, okay, how can we actually get funds onto Solana? Obviously, Wormhole is the biggest bridge right now. But for liquidity on Wrapped assets, like Ether BTC, that's something that definitely needs to grow in order to like promote usage. We recently listed Wrapped ETH and Wrapped BTC on a platform as well. And hopefully that grows the liquidity for both assets like significantly. But that's been like a key issue for traders kind of like using our exchange. But what we think is going to be very exciting that Circle is looking to launch in the next couple of months is CCTP into Solana and out of Solana. So that will allow for a native mint and burn of USDC natively on Solana and ETH, and from L2s as well. So hopefully that should drive a lot of adoption. We recently added a bridging function onto our website where you can auto bridge from ETH L1, Arbitrum, and BSC. We actually seen a lot of inflows from there. So I guess what we want to dispel is this myth that you can't bridge into Solana or it's too hard to bridge in Solana, by just wrapping it into the experience as simple as we can, and increasing liquidity on the underlying as well. But that's been like the main thing. I think that is kind of taking us a step away from like EVM integration, right? The other thing that we're really excited about is MetaMask snaps. So this is still kind of under the wraps, but we've been working with the MetaMask snaps team to build a custom drift snaps that allows you to approve transactions and hold funds within a MetaMask wallet. Allows you to connect to Drift and other Solana apps as well. So we're excited about ways to essentially connect to other ecosystems and to expand this whole ecosystem from there as well, just by making it super easy for anyone to participate.
Yeah, I think everything that Cindy said is like great for what's to come for the Sol ecosystem. And I guess I don't really know if I have anything to add on like how do we make people more excited about using this blockchain versus another. But the thing that I feel like my talents could go into is just trying to help make sure that protocols don't get exploited or there's any security vulnerabilities in the frameworks for writing smart contracts on Solana. So if Solana can avoid any sort of major exploit or issues once people feel confident using the chain, I think that'll just, increase confidence and protect user capital. I know, like, for instance, audits, just a small team trying to get an audit is really, really expensive right now. Like the auditors are great, like they know their stuff, but it's kind of out of reach for a lot of up and start projects. So I'm thinking that over time, if there's like a fuzz testing framework, or we use like ChatGPT just gets like super good over the next year, and like you can just use it to audit smart contracts better. I think those things could be a real boon.
Sorry, could you explain the fuzz system? I'm not familiar, so I'm going to assume some people.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. So fuzz testing, I guess, just a buzzword for like throwing the kitchen sink at a smart contract in like a sandbox setting. So what that means is just like literally trying every single input and like possible action you can do, like thousands, hundreds of thousands, and just seeing if like any invariants break. Like, were you able to drain funds by just sending like random transactions for days, right? Like, this is used a lot in like other industries where they're really security conscious. So building like a general framework for smart contracts to just use that could help the security situation.
Awesome. Could we go into, I want to ask about kind of the 3 different liquidity mechanisms that Drift uses and kind of how they all work together.
Yeah, Z, maybe you can take this one. This is your brainchild.
Yeah, I guess as Cindy mentioned, like originally the only liquidity mechanism was virtual AMM as a counterparty for takers, but now we have a three-step-esque process where a user basically submits an auction. Every single order that they submit, like a market order, is just an auction. And an auction has 3 parameters: a start price, an end price, and a duration, like how long is the auction running for. And basically all that happens is the user's like, I'm willing to buy it at this price, like let's say $20. And then the next slot, it becomes $20 and a penny, right? So it's just like becomes slightly more attractive for somebody to fulfill them over time. And the first step for the liquidity process is like a just-in-time maker. So a just-in-time maker can submit an order that would satisfy the user's auction and be their counterparty. The second step, or kind of tied with the first step, is the order book, where a filler or anybody can search all the user orders in the system and then match them with that one taker. And then the final step is if there is no, user provided liquidity on the books for that order that satisfies the auction price, after a 10 slot or so speed bump, the user order can fulfill itself against the virtual AMM. And the reason there's a speed bump is to avoid latency arbitrage against the virtual AMM and have it be hit by like lots of toxic flow. And then I kind of described in like silos, but the way that they kind of all work together is that people can provide liquidity on the virtual AMM, and then the virtual AMM will kind of look at what's happening with the JIT auction and the order book and decide to provide supplemental liquidity piggybacking off those active market maker prices in order to rebalance. So you kind of have this system where there's this, there's these 3 systems you can get filled, but all of those systems are kind of interconnected in a way where the virtual AMM can mimic the like original guys for liquidity.
Awesome. Yeah. I want to try and get into each one of those a bit more specifically. Starting off with the JIT liquidity, I guess I have two kind of like different areas of not concern, but just interest. Number one being I haven't looked at the numbers in a couple weeks, but as far as I remember, the amount of orders that are actually filled by JIT liquidity or JIT makers isn't really that substantial compared to the order book or the VAMM. I'm wondering if you guys have a good idea of what kind of impact having the JIT liquidity mechanism has on Drift as a whole, given that it doesn't process tons of volume. How useful do you see it being, or how useful have you found it to be thus far?
Yeah, that's a great point. So honestly, until recently, I don't think the SDK, etc., has made it very easy to be a JIT maker. So when somebody comes into Drift, they either are just going to passively LP on the VAM, or they're going to do a normal, order book strategy that they're used to on any other venue. So honestly, as of recently, there's a new JIT proxy contract and a new JIT proxy like SDK where it's a lot easier for anyone who's integrating to easily express the JIT liquidity that they're willing to provide at in a way that's not as like infrastructure intensive. So this is like basically we notice basically exactly what you've been saying over time too, and on the development side, we've made a lot of improvements to the way somebody can get integrated with JIT liquidity. I think my thesis is that this is the most profitable end state for somebody to provide liquidity to a user and will ultimately be the best way for benign flow to get good execution. So just, somebody clicking on the UI or like your typical even Uniswap user would be considered benign flow. And Uniswap X came out recently to, maybe mixed, but mostly, positive things like no gas, you get better execution than on normal Uniswap. So I feel like there's a lot of confirmation that this type of liquidity mechanism could prove useful, but definitely making it as simple and easy to integrate as a market maker is kind of the hurdle we feel is the thing we have to cross right now.
Right. So in that scenario where you're able to make it more democratized or easy to access, I guess, does that I guess this is kind of like a good segue into what DLPs are, because I'm wondering if greater utilization of JIT liquidity kind of results in worse flow for DLPs. So if you could maybe explain how liquidity is provided from via DLPs and whether or not more liquidity being processed by the JIT mechanism is kind of affects what kind of returns they see or what kind of order flow they get.
Yeah, I can give a quick primer on what DLPs are and how the liquidity is provided there. So with DLPs, it's kind of our answer to what GLP was for GMX. It's a very easy way for users to provide liquidity to an existing liquidity mechanism without needing to customize, market making strategy, do all that infrastructural jazz that most people, don't have the time or energy to do. With DLP, you're essentially depositing into isolated pools for each market. So we have a market for Seoul, which is our biggest market yet. I think we have about 5 mil of liquidity there. You essentially take on a counterparty position to the traders who are trading in the Seoul market who get filled with the AMM. So I think how we describe it is that you take on a share of the AMM fills as a proportion to how much liquidity you provide versus like the other DLP providers and the AMM itself. which has a set pool of liquidity it taps into. And so yeah, if a trader goes long on the exchange and it matches against the EMM, that increases the EMM's like net short position, and the trader the person who's deposited into DLP will also inherit a percentage of that short position. What they also get outside of the short position is a proportion of fees, some funding if their P&L is settled, and yeah, that's essentially like what it looks like. A lot of the returns actually come from just holding the opposite position from traders. So I think over the last month, it's actually generated around 140% because it's been short, and that's been pretty profitable for for anyone who's been short in the SOL market. But if you strip all of that out, and let's say you built like a delta hedging thing around it, the actual fees, like the fee only APR is closer to like 30%. So it's a much wilder swing if you're just like depositing to DLP. As for how, like, if JIT market is really active, how that would affect the DLP returns, I'll say it doesn't really, it would maybe push slightly more like toxic positions onto the EMM. But the EMM has a lot of protective mechanisms against any sort of like toxic flow. Like for instance, a lot of the JIT delays help protect the EMM against like more toxic fills. The EMM can also participate in the JIT auction. I can let Z talk a little bit through that, but yeah, I'll stick there in saying that the EMM has a lot of ways to protect itself to make sure that the net position ends up in the prices that it provides is sort of a fair price with regards to the inventory that it holds and to like the state of the volatility of the market as well.
Yeah, I guess I want to say that what Ali asked about, like, well, if the AMM is going to get this position and there's more JIT liquidity providers, the AMM is just going to end up holding a bag it doesn't want to hold, is basically, I think within like a month of the V2 development, our community was asking the exact same question. Like everyone who was analyzing the stuff we were doing, that was always their first, the first thing they came to drift for. So yeah, I think it's really good to see like people actively thinking and contributing so early on. And basically the mitigation measure around that is the AMM participation in the JIT auction that I alluded to earlier. So like if the AMM is holding inventory, but there's a JIT order that would rebalance the AMM is going to provide supplemental liquidity and basically like partially JIT the flow as it comes in, kind of relying on the skill of the market maker who's actively JITting, right? So there's an assumption made, but it's not an assumption like we're not like categorizing certain makers or anything. You're just kind of there's no like discriminant behavior with the AMM, and we also think the non-discriminant behavior of the AMM is important on an exchange where things could be literally discriminant. Like you could imagine a JIT maker doesn't want to fill somebody who might classify as a smart trader, right? So you'd only fill the traders you think you can win against. And if that trader doesn't have access to liquidity, that kind of breaks down the whole ethos of an exchange, right? So the idea of including indiscriminate liquidity in the exchange is really important for a system like this. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. I wanna just back up a bit to the DLP bit. You said 140% APR against Solana. That's a projection because you guys just launched that, I think, like a week, maybe 2 weeks ago. So that's what the performance has been like up until now. And you said, I think you mentioned just looking at fees, it ranges somewhere around 30%. Why is it so high? Like 140%? How are you guys hitting that? Like at least 2 weeks in, that's a decent amount of time to still get there.
Yeah, so that is actually a 30-day return. So if you deposit it into Sol's DLP 30 days ago, you would get that return. But if you actually break down like the sharp of that and like look at the volatility, it's pretty crazy. And the reason that it's so high, it mainly comes from the volatility of the market itself. We like to say that DLP is actually a pretty degen strategy without putting any trades on yourself, because you are exposed to all of the swings of the AMM, without like being delta hedged at all. So yeah, DLP is essentially like you getting filled in like net short, net long position. So it does like move around a bit. It adjusts its like inventory a lot, and that's why the returns are so high. But if you deposit it maybe like 2.5 weeks ago, your returns might be down from then because they're like the positions that you inherit at that time might have a different like delta profile. So it's quite hard to say. That's why we say the average person who invested like 30 days ago is up this amount, which sounds like an insane number. But yeah, when you actually break it down and look at the returns, it's very much because of the way the market has been moving. So yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
For
Okay.
anyone interested too, we have like a calculator in Grafana that really breaks down like in supreme detail
Mm.
the
Yeah.
the performance from holding a position, the performance from fees, the potential funding that you can earn. And we're always looking to improve that. And there's people hopping in the Discord asking really all the tough questions on that. And yeah, they've been happy with the details of that calculator. So if you love drilling into the numbers, hop into the Discord. We'll share the calculator and explain things to you the best we can.
Great. Yeah. Would definitely be interested in looking at that because and is there a reason why the returns for Solana for the Solana DLP is so much higher than the rest? Is that just a product of liquidity somehow? Because I'm seeing it's like head and shoulders above the rest in terms of TVL.
Yeah. I think majority of the trading volume still happens on Solana right now, at least on the Solana pair. I mean, yeah, I think people that come to Solana not to short the chain probably prefer to come in and like trade the asset. Solana is also like a relatively exciting asset to trade compared to like BTC and ETH, which is a lot. It doesn't move as much. There are smaller pairs that gain attention here and there, like from narratives that pop up. So OP was a pretty big narrative in the last month. Pepe also had some sick returns. I think it was like 6-7%. Not as high as Solana, but yeah, I think as a pot for activity, like Sol Perp has been the best, and that's why it's been the most profitable to LP there. From both like a fees and utilization point of view, Solana has been the highest.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Moving
Yep.
on to the order book now. Are you
Mm-hmm.
guys able to, I guess, first of all, just touch base on how that's managed a little bit? Maybe go into the keeper network and kind of how feasible it is for someone like me to go and run a keeper bot. And then from there, I would also like to hear your opinion on, I guess, like the importance and conversely the feasibility of decentralizing an order book on a perp dex. We had Rabbit X on, I think, last week or the week before last. The week before last, yeah. And we had a lot of good conversations there about just the path to taking an order book from being, maybe off chain managed by some users or market makers or entirely managed by a protocol to being at a point where it can be fully on chain and decentralized and whether or not that's even possible in the next year or two. So yeah, I'm curious to hear your guys thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe I can say a bit, and then Cindy can handle the questions I forgot. So in terms of running a keeper bot, if you have TypeScript installed on, like if you know how to run a command on the like console, like if you open the terminal on Mac and you know how to clone a repo and run a command, it's literally as simple as that, just to run a bot. A keeper bot doesn't need to have any capital up front. They just need to have some SOL in a wallet. And the rewards for running a keeper and matching and searching for these orders definitely exceeds the cost for like the SOL transaction fee, which is 5 zeros and then a 5 SOL. So yeah, we have, I'd say, like you can go to the Streamlit page to see how many keepers there are and what their keeper volume is, but last I've checked, it's like there's at least like 15 active keeper bots. We don't really know who these people are, and every time we try to make announcements in Discord, but yeah, we don't really know who's running a lot of these, to be honest, which is kind of fun too, right? It's like a permissionless system. We've been working on even lighter versions of the Keeper network. So if you don't have like a private RPC or anything like that, like you couldn't really compete with the original open source bot. But we've worked on an open source filler light, is what we call it, where you can just run with a public RPC and potentially get some fills as well, which is just democratizing it even further. The order book, I guess you brought up RabbitX and decentralized versus like off-chain order book. Everything about Drift, all the orders, everything is on chain. So you place the order on chain, the order gets matched on chain. The only like quote unquote off-chain thing is the searching process. So there's two users who have open orders. Both the orders are on chain, but somebody needs to find these two users and match them. That's kind of what the decentralized or unstructured order book would be another way to describe it. Relies on this keeper network for, just to kind of maintain what you would see in a central limit order book. Like here's the best bid, best asks. If you match them according to their fills, you get the highest incentive. But if you match them in a way where the taker gets a worse price, like the incentive, the reward is much lower. So basically, like the whole keeper network is incentivized to mimic the price time preference that orders have in a normal order book. And we're doing it through incentives and game theory rather than by structuring and writing to a single account, which can cause write lock contention and slow down the process that people get filled on chain. So that's kind of like our angle at tackling this. Like, don't compromise on the off-chain front, just compromise on the price time ordering front, but try to resolve it using incentives. And game theory, I guess, is that's like the trade-off. That's a trade-off there.
Are the incentives that you mentioned, I guess, specifically for the keeper network, is that something you guys are actively paying out, or is that a product of how you're structuring your fees? So is it incurring any sort of expenses for you?
Oh, no. Yeah, it's a fraction of the taker fees that are paid. So in theory, I guess, in order for the keeper network to survive, the taker fee can't go to zero. Otherwise, the keepers have no incentive to match users. But yeah, it's all self-contained and like within the money flow of the protocol itself. There's no like extra subsidy going out for keepers that isn't really sustainable.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, thanks for clearing that up. And then I guess from more of like an ideological standpoint, um, how do you because, obviously a lot of Drift's order book infrastructure is off chain, but done in a way that it's still decentralized or censorship resistant to an extent. Do you think that bringing an order book entirely on chain is something that is feasible or even like necessary compared to some of the solutions we've seen that get a bit more creative with trying to have it be decentralized without being entirely on chain? Look what you guys do, or like what DYDX V4 is trying to do. Do you think that in the long run we'll see more creative solutions like that, or will we see more of an attempt to try and put this stuff fully on chain?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we want to avoid is situations where you could spoof an order book, or you could essentially run matching in a way that isn't known to the public in off-chain order books. I think there's a lot of like creative implementations potentially with like ZK on an application layer, where you could make sure that the matching logic is done correctly and provably fair, without like bringing the entire order book on chain. But that's an interesting like application, and maybe like something that the market could like look at eventually. But I think, yeah, the situation we want to avoid is like sort of having this AWS database that's matching orders in a way that the general public or traders like don't know, and that sort of turns it into more of a centralized exchange fashion where you could have people getting advantages over others, or certain makers that have advantages over others. That's the situation we want to avoid, in all fairness. So any kind of innovation that we think of would avoid like situations like that where matching could potentially be malicious. But in saying that, like other like matching engine like innovations such as like DYDX V4, I think it's actually quite similar to what we're doing with Drift and Keeper bots, except that the Keeper bots are validators on their L1 instead of just participants on the exchange. I think with Solana, with Drift, what's interesting is that you can sort of do that without building a whole L1 validator network, and this is happening on an app level. So yeah, for DYDX, this is really just like bringing that onto the app chain level. And I guess what we're not sure of is like whether that's gonna see as much uptake as well. So.
Gotcha. Okay. I think you cut out a little bit there, but essentially the gist of it was um, being on Solana, at least towards the end, you were saying being on Solana specifically allows you to do what DYDX does, or DYDX V4 will do, essentially, which is securing the order book via validators, but that would be feasible on an app chain level on Solana. Can you explain a little bit more like how that's possible or what that means? I don't know if you caught that whole
Oh,
question there. It
yeah.
looks like you lost connection.
I think I'm back. Sorry, I had some internet cut out. Yeah, I think yeah, basically this happening versus on a validator level versus on a smart contract level. We've made the intention for this to be on the smart contract level, without needing to like fork the entire L1, because we think that with the throughput of Solana, it's actually possible to like do all of these things on like an app level itself, while sharing like block space with others, and have the incentive mechanism baked into the protocol versus the entire chain. And we say incentive mechanisms in this case, it's like giving out a percentage of fees to keepers. But yeah, I think doing this on an option level has been like pretty efficient, and we think could be the prevailing model in the future.
Interesting. Okay. I wasn't aware that something like that was super feasible on Solana, so that's good to hear, definitely. Um, Cool. Moving on to the VMM, which is probably the most controversial of the three, I think. Um, for those who are not super familiar, about I want to say 3 weeks ago now, NFT Perp V1 had to sunset due to incurring some bad debt. They had a pretty straightforward virtual AMN model, and I think that sparked a lot of discussion around. Specifically, there were a lot of people saying that VMMs are just inherently bad systems, like, they're never really gonna work. People were comparing them to under-collateralized stablecoins, and, Z, you had a really good thread that I think took, uh took a view that had a lot more nuance to it, mostly just about uh, not consolidating good VMM design principles with bad. Can you talk a little bit about the how you view the issue, kind of what some of the common concerns are, and why you think that drift remedies them, or why you think that VMMs aren't as bad as the popular crowd seems to think?
Yeah. I guess like the first thing I want to say on that is that pretty much everything that Fubar or the other people posted about NFT perp is like pretty much like 100% accurate with like why that particular one failed. But I guess yeah, like you mentioned, I just wanted to bring a little more nuance to it rather than just trying to uh, like kick an easy target down, right? Um, so I guess you can either look at the drift VMM maybe as an example for a slightly better one, where I made this analogy. I don't know how broken it is, but I'm going to try to make it anyways. There's this concept in computer science with virtual memory and like physical memory. And the idea with virtual memory is that you can push complexity down to the hardware. So it's up to the hardware to decide like how to actually resolve the liquidity and profits and losses um, between users. And by hardware in Drift, you can think of that as the accounting and risk engine. So you can think of like there's a backstop liquidity provider for a non-fungible asset. This is not, you know, the most dangerous thing you can concoct in crypto. It's non-fungible. It can't leave the DEX. And then you basically have a risk and accounting layer, which decides, well, how am I going to settle my profits and losses? And this is something that all leverage exchanges need, virtual AMM or not. You need a system that can properly handle settling losses between people, can avoid giving out too much leverage, because bankruptcies exist. And when bankruptcies happen, like we've seen it on, order books exchanges, we've seen it on like centralized and decentralized order book exchanges. We've seen bankruptcies or these like exploits. So by deferring a lot of this to the accounting system and the risk engine, I think you can build a lot of things. In terms of like really concrete good examples of VMMs, there's this group that I would encourage people to look into called Vest Labs. So they're like a crypto research firm, and they write like very, mathematically mature like papers about building proper virtual AMMs. And you can actually build these things in a way where there's no way for someone to settle a negative value with the virtual AMM. So you could literally quote as wide as it takes in order to ensure there's never a loss in the system. And people might ask, like, well, why are you designing these crazy things anyways? Can't we just have normal exchanges and normal collateral? And honestly, the problem is that there's too many crypto exchanges being built, and there's not enough high quality market makers or capital willing to deploy to like bootstrap these exchanges. So even if you're not a VAM maxi, you'll end up doing all these weird things like line of credit deals, token deals with market makers, all these weird emission schemes in order to try to bootstrap, which effectively is like it's kind of the same thing. It's a non-sustainable, potentially damaging thing for a project. And you don't ever build a loyal market maker for the DEX who literally is programmed to not leave. Like you can make a deal with the market maker, they're kind of a mercenary, maybe they'll stick around, but then as soon as things stop looking good or another project is offering more, they'll just hop away and you're left with nothing, no positive accumulation. So I'm not trying to paint them all as vultures, but to hinge the entire project on one or two external market makers cooperating with you gives them a lot of leverage. And I think trying to design systems where, well, how can we effectively bootstrap in a way that isn't loss leading and has proper resolution mechanisms like built in. So it's not like the developers have to go in and concoct some weird bankruptcy scheme. Like it's all programmatically built in. Like if there's a loss, how is that settled? Can I claim P&L in the future when it's available? I guess last thing I'll say, just to continue the analogy, is with FTX, for instance, there was a hole in the balance sheet. But a lot of people, I read some comments where it's like, well, if FTX kept running honestly and profitably for long enough, they probably could have paid it all off in the future, right? Maybe. I mean, this is an argument. Like if you're profitable month over month, you can pay off a debt, just like when you get a credit card, and you're in debt, like you can pay it off in the future if you're a profitable venue. And the idea that we can't let protocols kind of have this bond-like behavior, I think it's trying to limit the design space too much. I would love to encourage like a bunch of really smart economic tinkerers to come into crypto and try to design like these more complex bootstrapping systems. And I'm not saying that drift is down that risk curve that like at all, but I just want to encourage like more people to come in and do creative economic designs in crypto.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Cindy mentioned that most of this is kind of your brainchild, and we've had a few discussions on BAMMs and other parts of derivatives protocols. But I'm very curious how exactly this was your brainchild. Like, did you come up with this? I just don't understand how you came up with this system. Were you mimicking something like in TradFi or? Yeah, could you go into a little bit about how you kind of came up with this system and this model?
Yeah, I think Cindy is being very generous by calling it my brainchild. It wasn't like I was just sitting in a room by myself thinking for a month and then popped out with a spec in my head. I think a lot of the ideas here just come from talking to people who have seen a lot of different systems, looking at a lot of different protocols, and then just trying to mesh together a combination of things that work. And then as you're building, you kind of just iterate and notice, well, this kind of is weird. How do we fix that? You can either zoom in, zoom out to figure out, oh, if I link this, if we use the jet auction, maybe the AMM can become more balanced. So yeah, I would like to say that a lot of this comes from talking with other team members, especially people who have seen a lot of other crypto projects. And can point like, there's GLP, there's Cap Finance, there's lots of these projects doing interesting things. Maybe like that could maybe be like enhanced or improved by like meshing different ideas together.
I know Cindy, you have a hard stop. So I wanted to give you guys a chance to kind of maybe bring up something that we might have jumped over, or kind of give you guys the floor to discuss anything really.
Yeah, I guess any like shilling or any calls to action for the audience would be good here, definitely.
Or maybe we could ask the burning question of when token. We jumped over
Burning
that
When
part.
indeed.
token.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this project has been around for a pretty long time. We started all the way back in 2021, um, and yeah, I think the question of like when token is I guess dependent on like yeah what our conditions look like, whether we feel like we've sort of hit certain level of like escape velocity that's unincentivized. I think one big theme for Drift to wrap all this up is that a lot of the activities and the systems that we've built have run on very little incentives so far. So I think the incentives have been organic and natural and like built in within like taker fees. So even like when you look at the keeper system, it's a percentage of the taker fees that are paid to the network. JITs and makers all take a percentage of like maker fees. We've never paid market makers externally. And everything has sort of been like this bootstrapped ecosystem, which we're really happy about because it means that the system can grow on its own accord, like without like the need of an external like thing that brings some additional like potential energy into the mix. That doesn't mean that having this like additional incentive mechanism can't like grow, and we absolutely think that that's necessary for like the rocket ship. But what we've been excited about is building like this natural incentive system that like works really well, and then like putting the fuel in the fire, right? So yeah, that's all I have to say. I think legal's probably gonna like text me now. But yeah, I mean, very excited to see this like continue to grow, and then add fuel when it makes sense.
Saw Big said PMF in the chat, so it sounds like it sounds like you guys are treating the whole token, or I guess external incentivization aspect, as secondary to the product kind of being able to function on its own, which I'm a fan of, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else you guys wanted to? Anything we might have missed?
Yeah. I thought obviously call to action. The easiest thing to do right now in Drift is probably just deposit into DLP. But I think we mentioned as well earlier that the DLP is unhedged at the end of the day. So what we're trying to do is like work with some protocols to also build hedged version of the DLP. So I think a lot of this was quite popular with like GLP back in the day, where people were building like hedged GLP. We think that's a good opportunity here because everything is in perps and it's much more liquid to hedge in perps, that you could have a strategy of the DLP that's like running with the hedging built in. So very excited about that. Something maybe announced in the coming like weeks or so. But yeah, that's been in the works for a while. So if you haven't yet, deposit into DLP, and then when hedge DLP comes out, maybe you want to put some more risk off capital there. But that's not financial advice. So yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely be checking it out, and I'm curious to see more from that the calculator you guys mentioned as well.
Yeah.
What about I mean, I know roadmaps are memes, but do you guys have any cool stuff planned between now and the end of the year that we can expect to look forward to?
Or any goals that you guys have set for yourselves and
Yeah.
the team?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. I think, yeah, right now, we're number one, the app for perp dexes on Solana. We want to be #1 across all chains. That's a goal. And I think a yardstick as well is not just to compete against other perp dexes, because that's probably like 50 perp dexes today. Our goal is really to increase the market share against centralized exchanges, right? I think dexes are still like less than 5% SX volume. And we think that this time, if any, the infrastructure has been the best it's been for dexes to rise up against centralized exchanges. So yeah, very excited about that. A couple other things coming up where we're launching vaults. So vaults allow you to delegate your account, essentially delegate some other people's account to yours, so you can run strategies for them. This is useful for like fund managers, anyone who's building like a managed protocol of sorts. So a lot of interesting applications there. We are pretty excited about launching something that appeals more to degens as well, like higher leverage perps and things that could bring more of the rollbit type flow into the exchange. Yeah, what else is coming up, Z? I know there's we've been cooking up a lot of stuff that sometimes like it even escapes my mind.
Yeah, there's if you go to the Drift Labs repo, which is the whole project for Drift, you can see all the commits coming through and all the new stuff that we're working on and testing. Another thing that we've been thinking about is similar to like these, like you can run more automated strategies on centralized exchanges. Having like a way to do, TWAP buys or just other like risk, like automations you can put on your account, definitely has been requested. And then, yeah, just making it easier for somebody who doesn't want to invest, weeks of their life in order to do something on the protocol. Maybe make it like an hour. Yeah, I've noticed like a lot of people just want something that works, is reliable, and they can use quickly. So a lot of the dev effort has been around doing something like that.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely lots to look forward to there. Thanks for that. It's like unrelated, but I've been trying to sell Cedo on Drift for like since like the 3 or 4 months ago when I first found out about it, and he just told me he's converted now after talking to you guys. So thanks for
Oh wow.
helping me help him see the light.
I think it was more out of ignorance than actually like just disagreeing with what you guys think. I just haven't had the time to kind of like delve into your guys' ecosystem. But we had a discussion like a few weeks ago on our primer with Nate, 0x Perp on Twitter, and he mentioned you guys as one of his like favorite derivatives protocols, and your guys' model, and we had a whole virtual AMM discussion, and yeah, kind of led up to that. And I think this conversation was really great. You guys really kind of lit the light bulb, I guess. So I appreciate it. I think that just about does it. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Really appreciate you guys taking the time. And thanks for building all of this stuff and like just thinking about it just so we can just talk about it.
The armchair analyst.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Look forward to seeing you in the order books, Andrew.
Awesome.
Of course.
Cool.
Thanks guys. Really appreciate this.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Great chat. Bye-bye.